Ledwidge, former military intelligence officer and now senior lecturer in strategy at Portsmouth University. Professor Ledwidge, thanks so much for joining us. Israel's tactics now, they've put tanks at the border, but these are tanks which are most likely going to be used in incredibly dense residential areas. How do they plan on using them and not risk civilian lives?
Well, good evening. The tanks are intended really for what's called direct support. It's unlikely we'll see the tanks themselves, the Merkava tanks the Israelis have, in the streets very often, for the simple reason they're very vulnerable there and can be struck and destroyed. And they're pretty vulnerable anyway, as we saw in Ukraine. So they'll be used for fairly specific tasks. What we will see is armoured personnel carriers, infantry fighting vehicles, which are designed and were specifically designed for a Gaza operation. So we don't know what form this assault is going to take or when it'll happen. It'll almost certainly start in the next few days, at least by Monday, I would think. But this will not be an armoured struggle. As your reporter there said, this will be essentially an infantry battle with a lot of complications for the Israeli assaulters.
Can you take me through what the steps most likely will be in terms of sending the infantry then into each block by block? How exactly does it work?
Well, the idea is to take minimal risk. Those soldiers you saw before are engaged as we speak now in briefing operations. They're being supplied, they're being equipped properly. More or equally importantly, the logistics are being put together. The Israelis, like everyone else, depend on logistics, which is what wins or loses wars. As they approach the start point, having been briefed, they will be supported by a very powerful panoply of explosive weaponry. Their artillery, you see them often in pieces. Air power, of course. And over the last couple of years, Israel has really switched its doctrine to rely a lot more on highly aggressive, highly kinetic action to take minimal risks. But ultimately, those infantry soldiers are going to have to go into the streets. They're going to be facing IEDs, improvised explosive devices, booby traps, that's traps triggered by simple things like tripwires or by their own steps, by infrared perhaps. And of course, there are those tunnels. Gaza, like the Israelis, have planned for this operation for many years. Both sides are ready for the other. It's going to be really challenging for both of them. Now, one other thing for the Israelis, which is unique for them and new, is the problem they're going to have with being watched from above by Hamas drones and indeed attacked occasionally. But Israel's ready for that too. And what we're going to see is a real step change in this kind of urban warfare, with Israel practicing what's been training on with respect to its own drone swarms and perhaps even AI-controlled weaponry.
A really futuristic, technological type of warfare, but surely then the people most at risk are these millions of civilians which are now aiming to flee this area in time for this assault to begin. How will Israel manage that?
Israel, of course, faces this complication, has faced it in the past. And whilst, as you heard from the officer there, they do their best to avoid civilian casualties, there's no avoiding it in this kind of urban environment, especially when Hamas, of course, has given the order for civilians to stay put, which is needless to say, to impose even greater casualties on their own people with the political and media results. So that's the major challenge for them. And of course, there's the additional deeply complicating and really hard tactical and moral problem of Israel's hostages and what Hamas will be doing with those. We've no idea yet. So it's a multi-level problem for the Israelis, this. And the civilian issue and the non-combatant issue is absolutely tragic. And it may well be that Israel may allow some mitigation, perhaps women and children. But of course, if Hamas doesn't allow anyone to go, they're staying where they are. And that will inevitably vastly increase the casualties in this operation.